The New York Times recently put out a piece featuring ways that you can spend less time waiting in line when visiting the Disney parks. But is any of this good advice, and should you consider doing any of these things during your next Walt Disney World vacation? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the balcony, which I admit is not the most exciting of locations today, but as of recording this, it is October 9th, 2024. Hurricane Milton is making his way over, and so we're hunkered down, just staying put for now, but I still wanted to chat with you, and I figure I got nothing but time, and I've got some things I've been wanting to talk to you about and haven't had the chance to as of yet, so let's take advantage of this time that we've got together and cover some things that I've been wanting to cover, including this piece that was put out by the New York Times. Now look, I'm sure that it seems a little odd to some of you, especially some of you who are big fans of Disney, that anyone would be going to the New York Times for advice in this particular area, but it's pretty standard stuff. Places like the New York Times have a travel section where they share information about visiting various vacation destinations, including places like the Disney parks. And you know, I think it's a really interesting read because, of course, we're not talking about your like standard issue Disney info, although I honestly have no idea who wrote this article. I wasn't really focusing on their background or anything. I just wanted to see what they had to say. So sometimes you can get information that's a little outside the box, and sometimes you can get information that isn't all that great. I figure we'll go through this article today, we'll talk about it, I'll share some of my thoughts, and we can discuss if these are things that I would recommend you do during your Walt Disney World vacation. Also, you'll notice I'm not covering Disneyland. That's not my wheelhouse, you know? So how these things will work in Disneyland, I just don't know. Of course, if you have visited Disneyland, you got some thoughts, share them in a comment down below. Make a video of your own. You know, just contribute to the discussion in whatever way works best for you. Anyway, let's just jump in to their first recommendation. Also, I have not gone through this up until this point. We're doing this together. Just, you know, keeping it interesting. So right at the top of their list, no surprise here, fairly good recommendation, buy passes to skip long lines. Of course, they're referring to Lightning Lane, Multipass, and Single Pass. They go into some brief details here about both of those options. I think that this is a pretty good recommendation. Skip the line services are available not only here at Walt Disney World, they are also available over at Disneyland, but they're available at theme parks throughout the country and likely throughout the world. Paying a little bit extra, or sometimes a lot extra per person to wait in a shorter line, is a really appealing thing to a lot of people, and guests visiting the Walt Disney World Resort are no exception, you know, especially families with young kids. They want to try and avoid waiting any longer than they have to. So an option like Lightning Lane, Multipass, or Single Pass, or both is really great. Now, for those of you who are hearing about Lightning Lane, Multipass, and Single Pass for the first time, let me give you a really quick overview of what this is. Keep in mind, I'm going to breeze through this because there's a lot that we could talk about. Honestly, we could be sitting here chatting all day. So understand that if you want to know more, a little bit more research is going to be required. We have talked about Lightning Lane, Multipass, and Single Pass in the past, so you can of course go check that out if you're interested in learning more. There are also plenty of resources, including on the Walt Disney World website, where you can learn more about how it works and pricing and all of that as well. But again, I'm just going to breeze through some basics right now. So as I mentioned, Lightning Lane is Disney's skip the line service, and it's broken down into Multipass and Single Pass. Multipass is a pay per person per day service that will allow you to skip the line on multiple attractions at the Walt Disney World theme parks, again by paying per person per day. You will need to select these attractions ahead of time. It's not like some other passes where you can just flash the pass and go into a shorter queue. Single Pass is a little bit different. As the name suggests, Single Pass, you can only go on a single attraction a single time per day, though you will still have to pay per person in order to do that. See, I told you, it's kind of complicated, it's a lot, but again, just a quick overview. You can purchase Multipass and just do that. You can purchase Single Pass, which by the way is usually for the most popular attraction at a particular park, and just do that. You can purchase both. and do both, but you don't have to purchase one in order to purchase the other. Now, every time Lightning Lane comes up, there's always a conversation that kind of happens in the background about how expensive it is to add to your Disney day, whether we're talking about multi-pass and or single pass. And that's very fair. For a lot of families, adding on this extra expense to experience shorter wait times is just too much. Affordability is in the eye of the beholder, and different people have different priorities. So I do think it's worth mentioning that Lightning Lane multi-pass and or single pass is not going to be right for every family. It's also not going to be worth it in every case. Again, case-by-case basis, but there are some parks that it is a better value, at least in my opinion, than others. There are some parks where this is going to work better than it will at other parks. It's really just important for you to decide if this is something that you want to prioritize, whether it's something that you want to try and learn how to navigate or something that you want to work into your budget. That said, I do think it's important to note that this Skip the Line service definitely isn't comparable to other Skip the Line services at other theme parks and amusement parks in the local area. It's definitely much more affordable than what you'll find elsewhere, even though, again, some people think that it's just too expensive as it is. I feel like most people who say that they're kind of hung up on the fact that this is a service that Disney used to have for free and no longer does, which again is fair. I've got my own feelings on that as well, but in this current moment with everything that is available to us, because talking about the past isn't really helpful when it comes to planning for the future, at least not in this case. I do think it's worth noting that it will cost you less to do the Skip the Line service here at Walt Disney World than it will at places like Universal, for example. The systems also work differently, so it is going to be, again, a little bit more effort to do Lightning Lane, specifically Lightning Lane Multipass, than it will be to do a Skip the Line service at some other theme parks or amusement parks. So that's just something to take into consideration if this is the option that you're going to go with. All right, moving on to the next thing. Sorry, that last one just took so much time, but there's a lot to cover. Anyway, this one is join a single rider line or book a tour. Okay, so this is kind of two separate pieces of advice. Let's knock out the single rider one first, though. So single rider lines can be a really great way to spend less time waiting in line, but I don't really think that Walt Disney World is a good place for this piece of advice. Yes, it can be a good piece of advice for the right party, especially if you don't mind being separated, because you absolutely will be separated from your party. But also, it's not going to work if you have kids. Kids can't ride alone, especially those little ones. It's also not going to work at a long list of attractions. Walt Disney World has very few attractions with single rider lines, and while you can absolutely take advantage of some of those single rider lines, and the list may be growing because I think Rise of the Resistance now has a single rider line, though I'm not sure how long that'll hang around. Other single rider lines are Smuggler's Run, Rock and Roller Coaster Test Track, which currently is down for refurb, so I don't know if it will come back with a single rider line, and Expedition Everest. So there's only a few places where you can actually have this as an option at all, and single rider lines aren't always open and available. So it's a very hit or miss piece of advice. It's also a piece of advice that won't necessarily save you time. I hear that Rock and Roller Coaster isn't a really great single rider line to participate in because it moves so slow, and you could be waiting just as long, if not longer, than you would be if you were in the standby. So, we'll see. We'll see how that goes in the future. I'll have to test that out. But very, very hit or miss on that piece of advice. A good piece of advice, but definitely not right for everybody. Booking a tour, though, so this can be a really great option, but this comes with a hefty price tag. Quite frankly, I do think that it's a better option, especially if you have a really large group, maybe a number of families who are traveling together, and you can all bear the burden of the cost of a VIP tour. That's what we're ultimately talking about here. These tours are hundreds of dollars per hour. I don't have the rates in front of me right now. I'm sorry, I should have prepared accordingly, but it can be like $5,000 a day, which is a lot of money, but also isn't too bad if you have, again, a larger party. There is a minimum number of hours and there is a maximum number of people. So that's something to take into consideration. Again, this is not going to be right for everybody, but it can be a way to knock out a lot in one day. You also have a guide guiding you around. You will, at least to the best of my knowledge, be escorted through that lightning lane without having to pay an additional cost for the lightning lane. Guides for these tours can also offer assistance in a lot of other ways as well. hotel. For example, hanging out with kids who might not be able to ride certain attractions, so the entire family can ride together. It can be a great option, but certainly is one that comes with a hefty price tag, so it's definitely not going to be right for everybody. But if it's something that you could swing, again, especially if you have a bigger party and you can all kind of spread the cost around, I think that it's a really good option. Next up, one that I talk about all the time, take advantage of early entry. Yeah, totally. Great piece of advice, one that not enough people take advantage of. So if you're a guest staying at one of the many Walt Disney World Resort hotels or other participating hotels, these are non-Disney owned and operated hotels that still have perks. Swan, Dolphin, Shades of Green. Also, some hotels in the Disney Springs area qualify as well. You can get into the theme parks 30 minutes before they open to day guests. Yeah. It's as simple as that. And even though, yes, it does require you to get up early, and yes, there are a lot of guests who are staying on property, and yes, it's only 30 minutes, that's a huge advantage. There's no way around it. In fact, most of the time when we're visiting the theme parks, we're not staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel because we're locals. We live here, right? I still prefer arriving early when the park opens to day guests because you can still get on so many attractions with a very short line. And that's me getting there as a day guest. Imagine the advantage of getting there 30 minutes prior to day guests. This is honestly the easiest and cheapest way to experience shorter wait times if you're visiting Walt Disney World. And look, I know there are a lot of you out there who are already primed and ready to tell me that you're paying extra just by staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, but that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of very affordable Walt Disney World Resort hotels and other hotels that still get this perk. So make sure you're doing your research, make sure you're crunching numbers. One way or another though, this is a great way to experience shorter wait times. The last tip here says pack lunch or plan ahead. Oh man, this is another great piece of advice. We talk about it all the time. You know, everyone focuses on the time you're going to have to wait to get on attractions, and yeah, those are the longest lines in the park, right? But no one talks about how long you have to wait to eat. And yeah, that can take a chunk out of your day that you weren't planning on taking out of your day. So here's how we can avoid that. Number one, pack a lunch. Also, this is a great way to save some money. The same is true for packing snacks. I know it's not going to be everyone's style, but it's something I do all the time. I know so many of you do it as well. If you have your own lunch, you don't have to wait in line to get lunch. It's about as simple as that. Also, you can eat while you're in line, eat while you're just chilling in the shade. You know, it's really convenient to have your own food, whether it is a full-on lunch or whether it's just a snack. But planning ahead is really important. There are a few different ways that you can plan ahead when it comes to eating at Walt Disney World. Of course, making dining reservations ahead of time means less time waiting in walk-up lists, which is available if you're going to be eating at a table service restaurant. Sometimes you can join a walk-up list, but you still have to wait. Nobody's got time for that, certainly not at Walt Disney World. But another thing that they mentioned in this article, and I think it is definitely worth making note of, is using the mobile order feature. Now, mobile order is like the way to go when you're visiting Walt Disney World. You can order your food through the My Disney Experience app. And I know it's not everyone's style, but one thing that you're not hearing a lot of people talk about is while you can still order your food from a kiosk, there's very limited kiosks where you can do that open. And that means you can be waiting 30, 45 minutes in that line in order to order from that kiosk when you could do it immediately from the My Disney Experience app. So that's something I recommend that you take a look at. We've talked about it before on the channel. Check it out, become familiar with it, and you can cut back so much on the amount of time that you're waiting, which is another win in my book. But all right, I think that about covers it. Not a bad article, pretty solid advice. I'm happy with all of it. I do most of it, but let me know what you think in a comment down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your favorite piece of advice? We want to hear it. But all right, I think that's all for now. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say, and if you have any pieces of advice to add to the list. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe out there if you happen to be here in Florida, and we'll check in with you soon. Bye.